Good day, this is Mike Nelson. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Assessment here in Coeur d'Alene Public Schools, and it is my honor to introduce you to the Idaho Reading Indicator for the 2017-2018 school year. Our purpose is very clear. We want to make sure that the Idaho Reading Indicator is given uniformly to all students in Coeur d'Alene Public Schools. We also want to give you a little bit of background as to how the exam should be administered one-on-one, and to make sure that the scores have meaning. So we'll spend some time also talking about scoring and data entry. The Idaho Reading Indicator was established by the Idaho Legislature in the spring of 1999 to make sure that all students statewide are administered with a single reading test. That gives us an opportunity to make sure that students are growing from term to term, from the fall to the spring, and it also gives us opportunities to identify students who may need some interventions to improve their skills. You can see the schedule on the screen at this time. Our testing window has already opened, March 19th, and the last day that exams can be administered is May 18th. You'll notice that many of the schools have actually pushed their schedules to the back end of that window. Keep in mind that, again, we cannot provide the exam after the 18th of May. Those schools who have shading next to their names, Hayden Meadows, Northwest Expedition, and Sorensen, have chosen to bring in building proctors in addition to our external district proctors. We'll make sure that we have a separate schedule available for you to be able to see. The Idaho Reading Indicator is given in 3 different subtests. Letter Name Fluency, LNF, where a student is identifying letter names. LSF, Letter Sound Fluency, where a student is given simply a series of letters and asked to identify the sound. And an RCBM, a reading curriculum-based measure. It's mostly a passage, and students are asked to do simply their best reading to identify a score, 1, 2, or 3 at the end of all of those assessments. There are a couple of items that you will need to be able to give the Idaho Reading Indicator. The first, especially if you're a guest in any of our buildings, make sure that you have your name tag on. Everybody also should have a stopwatch, some pencils, a clipboard, and even a calculator if you wish. All of those items, if you are an external proctor, will be provided for you. If you are an in-building proctor, make sure that you work with your title teacher or assistant principal to ensure that you have what you need. Upon your arrival, you'll have a quick pre-meeting with the title teacher or lead teacher for the distribution. However, keep in mind that each school sets their own schedule. So it's not unusual that teachers or proctors will be asked to move building to building or classroom to classroom to be able to administer the exam. Keep your test secured at all times. Keep the materials with you. And as you travel, make sure that everything that you should have is in your sight. You'll also notice down at the very bottom that even though this is an assessment of learning, we also want to make sure that we get to know our students well. That individual attention means so much to them, and it typically allows them to perform well on the assessment. So please plan for about 10 minutes for each kindergarten student and about 8 minutes for each other student in grades 1 through 3. Testing for the Idaho Reading Indicator is given one at an individual table. I do not encourage you to be in a large open space like a gymnasium. I also would encourage you, however, to have the same proctors per grade level. Try to have the same team doing all of the kindergarten exams, first grade exams, or second grade exams along the way. As students give their responses, please make sure that no student is penalized for having an error in dialect, articulation, or whether they are actually receiving services as an ESL student. Mostly, start it off by just getting to know them. Introduce yourself and ensure the comfort for the exam. Coeur d'Alene is a community of high expectations, and to make sure that all parents and guardians are aware also of what their students will be doing, we have sent this communication out to them, which details the practices of the Idaho Reading Indicator, as well as what you can expect to see with scores. So let's dive into the exam and take a look at what happens in a kindergarten classroom. For kindergarten, students will be receiving a sheet of paper that has a series of uppercase and lowercase letters. All they are asked to do is place their finger on the very first letter and name the letter name as it goes through. So if you were using the example on the screen, the correct answers would be Y, W, L, or I, K, P, G. Let's take a look.
Here are some letters. Begin here and tell me the names of as many letters as you can. If you come to a letter you don't know, I'll tell it to you. Are there any questions?
No.
Put your finger under that first letter. Ready? Begin.
F, H, W, Y, B, B, X, D, M, S, U, Z, Q, H, K, V, S, O, Z,
G,
C, D, A, U, F, Y, E, T, Q, Z, G, J, V, G, H, E, T,
Stop there.
In kindergarten and first grade, students also receive a letter sound fluency assessment, where the goal is simply to identify as many letter sounds as they can within 1 minute time. Once you're ready to begin this assessment, provide a copy to the student and place their finger on the very first letter. If at any time a student stops during that time or needs some extra direction, simply point to the next letter and say, "What sound?" At the end of 1 minute time, stop the assessment and put a bracket at the end identifying which letter the student ended with. It should look something like this.
Here are some letters. Begin here and tell me the sounds of as many letters as you can. If you come to a letter you don't know, I'll tell it to you. Are there any questions?
No.
Put your finger under that first letter. Ready? Begin.
E, Y, W, E, K, O, T, Z, O, G, J, E, U, O, J, E, Y, D, K, Z, Z,
What sound?
D, K, Z, T.
Stop.
In grades 1 through 3, students will finish the assessment by taking a reading curriculum-based measure. In this exam, students will demonstrate fluency by reading 3 passages at each of their grade levels. We'll start with the first passage. Simply provide a copy to the students so that they can read, and make sure that they have their finger over the very first word. Start the stopwatch when they first utter a word. Any words that are incorrect, just put a slash on it, but be careful. Do so quietly and quickly as to not bring attention to the markings. At the end of each of the passages, you'll go through and mark and identify the total words read correctly. The student score is the median score between those passages. Again, the students will be given 3 separate assessments that you'll be able to use. If a student does look a little tired, give them a stretch break or pause as needed along the way. It should look something like this.
When I say begin, start reading aloud at the top of this page.
Okay.
Read across the page. Try to read each word.
Okay.
If you come to a word you don't know, I'll tell it to you.
Okay.
Be sure to do your best reading.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
No.
Okay, go ahead and begin.
Dad and Rob went fishing. "We will catch fish to eat for lunch," said Dad. They loaded their fishing things into the boat. Poles, bait, life jackets, and a net. "Let's catch a fish," said Rob. Dad made a boat go fast over the water. Rob liked feeling the wind in his hair. He liked feeling the cold water splashed his face. Soon they arrived at Dad's secret fishing spot. Dad took a minnow to put it on his hook. The big fish will try to eat the little fish. Then we will catch him.
Stop.
The Idaho Reading Indicator does allow some accommodation. However, there is one accommodation that is not approved for any reason, and that is changes in timing. No matter the abilities of the student, this is a 1-minute timed assessment. Approved accommodations, however, could include an alternate location or testing by a familiar person. Students with accommodations, however, will need to be identified in advance, and those accommodations will need to be validated in advance of beginning the assessment. Here are some other accommodations that are available. After the assessment is done, you can take a nice deep breath and excuse the student. From that point, you'll need to remove the cover sheet from the examination copy. There'll be a label on that cover sheet. It is about a quarter size, a postcard size, and that information will need to be filled out completely. Please double check your work. After the end of the assessment, somebody from the titled team or the office personnel will come by to pick up those cover sheets. Proctor should not let them out of their hands until received by proper personnel. Once everything is all done, please make sure that everything is reorganized. Use the rubber bands provided to organize your materials by their grade level and ensure that your Proctor testing materials get back to a school resource. At that point, scores will need to be entered into Skyward for instant results. For teachers and parents, they can see them right away in the teacher gradebook, and they can also see them on student and/or parent access. Just a couple of reminders, that timer that should be used but not visible to students. Students will get nervous if they know how much time is left on the assessment. Make sure that it's only something that you have. Proctor should also never tell students to slow down during the IRI. Although it is not a speed reading exam, read the script thoroughly. Make sure that they feel comfortable along the way. It'll have a lot of helps in it for you. And also, keep in mind that our proctors may have to be mobile to make sure that the test could be administered in about 4 hours' time in the entire building. It's been an honor working with you as part of this Idaho Reading Indicator over the last several years, and we thank you so much for your attention during today's video.